I hear an introduction like that. I only know one thing about my own life, and that is one of these days I got to get a day job. Got to get something that's worth talking about. Anyway, the whole introduction was a scam. I'm only here tonight as proxy. I'm about to introduce you to the stars of the show, to Danny, to Duffy, and to Lady Hildegard, who is sitting in the hall out there, and you may all feel free to meet her tonight. If you give her a piece of paper, she'll chew her signature right into it. Don't worry about it. I want to talk to you a little bit about why I wrote this book at all. I began to write this book in the home of a friend. And while I was writing, the family dog was pacing the floor, running around in circles, crying for her owner who was on the other side of the kitchen door. Clearly, this dog and her owner have a serious relationship. So I also, at the same time, was thinking back home, about 2,000 miles away from where I was, Lady, my little medium-sized parrot, listens intently to the Skype call that signals my daily contact with her. This is a serious relationship too. But more importantly, these scenes are common all over the world, starting in your houses and running down your blocks. Everywhere, humans and animals form great secret bonds that give them both another kind of gift of life, which is one of the reasons I wrote this book. There are others, though, maybe more important. I'm grappling with that. You see, one day in a public lecture, I found myself beginning to talk about the difference between the two creation stories that have shaped the consciousness of the Judeo-Christian world for thousands of years. In the first creation story that you know so well, Adam and Eve, first couple and prototypes of the human race that would come after them, are given, Scripture says, dominion, power, over what we call the Garden of Eden. But there is a second creation story, almost never preached, little read, and hardly ever remembered. In the second creation story, God the Creator brings the animals to Adam to be named. Clearly, the relationship between humans and animals had once held a very prominent place, a very primary place in the human catalog of spiritual lessons. In fact, the second creation story, scholars tell us, was actually, at first, the first. It was moved later by some guys who wanted to press the power argument, but as a matter of fact, is an indication of how deep and primary the Creator saw this relationship between humans and animals. Naming, after all, is an act of relationship, not dominance. We name only those things that are near and dear to us. We name our children. We name our relatives. We name our families. We name the animals we take into our families. The animals we commit ourselves to care for. The ones we take responsibility for. The ones with whom we develop a personal relationship. Creation story 1 is the domination story. It defines our responsibility for the care of the entire planet. But creation story 2 is the relationship story. By asserting a particular bond between humans and animals, it inserts us into the animal world and animals into our world with everything that implies about interdependence. With all of that in mind, I began to think differently about human-animal relationships, about how far we've come from any relationship with nature. And I realized then that there is also another level of reality that required the writing of this book. The truth is, the real truth is, my own life demands it. Like most of the rest of the human race at this moment in history, I have been raised almost entirely in cities. I have never planted a flower. I have never staked a tomato plant. I have never watched anything grow or harvested it or had to wait for it to ripen in order to live. And I have begun to see the effects of that on the human soul. In this neighborhood where you sit at this moment, we have children who have never dug up a potato, who have no idea where radishes and other vegetables come from, who were shocked to learn that peaches grow on trees. These are children who learn about food in cans and animals from picture books. And yet we know that pets are everywhere. So how do we explain that? The modern tendency to accept pets into our lives and our homes are, I think, a subconscious human attempt to cling to nature in a world made of glass and steel that has divided us from it. Unless we begin to align ourselves with nature, nature will be endangered and our own lives with it, our own souls with it, in fact. We are here as part of creation, not as controllers of it and not as consumers of it. We are here to take care for this planet, not to exploit it. We are here to find our proper place in it, to grow with all of it spiritually as well as physically, and physically as well as spiritually. So my book starts at the personal end of the subject. This is not a theology book. It is a book about the role of pets in the development of our own spiritual and psychological lives. It's a book about reestablishing the relationships that creation obviously meant us to have. So I'm introducing to you the first speaker of the night, Danny, the Irish setter, big, nimble, long-eared, totally demanding Irish setter. This woman had been coming to the monastery to see me for several months now. I'd been listening to her carefully, session after session, asking what I thought were probative questions, hoping for the breakthrough that would end her agonies. But every opening seemed to be a dead end. Instead, she simply went through the routines of life from week to week, and then came back to talk listlessly about the listlessness that entrapped her. She was disappointed in the process, I'm sure. I know that I was. I watched her bend over in the seat, tears in her voice, but not on her face, never on her face. Her posture said it all. She was smothering under the weight of her own life and too emotionally exhausted to do anything but talk about it. Just to sense the tears in her voice, however, gave me new hope. Everything up to this time had never been anything but recitation. Maybe now we could really begin, she and I, to touch the feelings that went with them, finally. Then I heard it, just a small tingle of a sound, but definitely a sound. I was sitting where I could see both her and the large desk directly across the room from me. She did not move, but I recognized the sound, and I knew what I was hearing. Under that big desk across the room, the big red Irish setter, Danny, much older now, lay sleeping. I also knew that this was a woman who really did not like dogs. Until now, I had always remembered to take him out of the room before she arrived. But not today. I took in breath and said one of those great private prayers that are more hope than theology. Oh God, dear God, do not let that dog come out now. It will ruin everything. Nevertheless, prayer or no prayer, I already knew it was all too late. I could hear Danny under the desk, lumbering from one side of drawers to the other, stretching his legs, rising to his full height, and pushing back on the desk chair to extricate himself. His long, graying head appeared around the corner of the desk. Inside myself, I refused the inevitable and tried to scowl him into place. Not on your life. The dog looked at the woman and then at me, at her, and back at me again. The frown accented his white eyebrows as he shook the sleep out of himself and began walking gingerly across the room, his old legs creaking as he came. My hope was to take him by the collar when he got to me and then push him quietly behind me into the anteroom above. But no, instead, Danny just changed course and went straight to the woman frozen into silence on the sofa. He put his great mottled head down squarely on her lap, his long soft nose tilted up, his eyes melted into hers, one soft broad paw raised on her knee. Then, without even so much as a glance at me, she took his big bony head in her hands and began to talk to him. You understand, don't you, Danny? You know what it's like to have no one who understands you. You understand. And the tears let loose in one great gasp. She bent over him, holding him ever more tightly, and cried and cried and cried. I didn't move. I just watched as he raised his head even higher, pressed it flat up her breast, and nuzzled into her neck. Then, when the sobs had quieted for a while, he threw a look back at me, an accusatory look, as in, did you do this to her? And lay down at her feet. She was ready now. It had happened. Rubbing his head as she spoke, all the great hurts of the past came out, and the way to the future opened with a rush. I learned a lot that day about empathy, when sympathy is meaningless and feeling means more than talk. Danny did not see the tears and pass them by, didn't write a prescription, didn't give her an exercise. No, Danny brought empathy to the session. Danny felt those tears and stayed in them himself till they stopped. And there was his lesson to me. It's support. The surety that there will be someone who stands by when everything else in life has failed, that really saves us from despair. It's someone who understands the burden I'm carrying, even if there is nothing at all they can do to help me lift it, that reduces the weight of the load. It's knowing that someone, anyone, will walk the way with us that gets us up the next morning to face the same world we left yesterday. It's support that makes life possible. Then it is the spiritual works of mercy that count. Sympathy sustains a person through the pain of the moment. It holds a person up until the pain calms. But empathy brings awareness of the depth of the pain. To be unable to recognize, to understand, to feel with another person's emotions is sign of the stunting of our own. Empathy and sympathy are not the same things. Sympathy feels concern for the person who is suffering, but does not feel the feelings they are feeling. Empathy feels the feelings of the other. When we see a widow cry at a coffin, when we watch her go home to a penniless family, we know the difficulty of it. But when we see the anguish on her face, her dread of tomorrow, her despair for the future, and we ourselves feel the great gray wall of life she's facing, that's empathy. Then we cry the tears we see in her. That's what Danny was teaching me to do. Second character, Duffy. The water dog and other stereotypes. The golden retriever was bred to be a bird dog. The dog's value was in his breeding as a retriever, not only on land, but also on water. I believed that once. And then I got Duffy. It was the year I could hardly wait for summer to come. Duffy and I had bonded very well. He stayed by the office during the day. I kept him in my own bedroom at night. I could open the door of the monastery to let him out, and he never ran away. He came at every call. Here was the perfect dog for the perfect afternoon, and now was time for the fun part. As June melted into July, I made elaborate plans. We would go to the lake for a day. No limits given, no amount of swimming, too much swimming. In the trip to the water, the bird dog Duffy sat in the back seat of the car, protected by his usual disdain for anything as mundane as excitement. But once on the bluff above the beach, Duffy changed. He began to pant a bit and run around in circles. My fear, of course, was that he would simply go charging into the water before any of us could get in there with him. But when I turned around, the dog, who always came when called, was nowhere in sight. I caught my breath. He must have gone by me so fast that I never saw him. I scanned the water for sight of his bobbing head. There was nothing at all there. I walked back up the ramp, and there he was, settled down in high grass, chewing on strands of straw, and completely settled in for the afternoon. Duffy, I called, come on. Duffy, come on, we're going swimming. Come on. Duffy, don't stay there. Duffy. But Duffy never moved. I got out the Frisbee. Duffy never moved. I tugged on his collar. Duffy played dead dog. So we coaxed and tugged and pushed. He was a water dog, after all, and at least deserved the right to do what such breeds loved best. The drop off the ramp finally gave us all the momentum we needed. The next thing I knew, we were all splashing in the water, and when I came up about 10 yards out, I knew instantly that something was wrong. Sure enough, there was Duffy, going exactly the opposite direction from the rest of us, and churning full steam ahead back to the beach. I tried the stick. I tried the ball. I splashed and called and splashed some more, but Duffy was long out of the water and trying to scratch his way up the hill. I began to laugh out loud. Somewhere I had seen a Snoopy cartoon I should have known about before we got Duffy. Frame 1. The man throws a stick, saying as he does, I, the man, shall throw this stick for you, the dog. Frame 2, the stick flies through the air. Frame 3, the stick flies through the air. Frame 4, the stick falls to the ground unnoticed. And Snoopy, propped up and typing on his typewriter, writes, and I, the dog, could not care less. I got it. It was the lesson of a lifetime. The expectations we have for another will not change either their basic interests or their basic abilities. The individuality that is their gift to the world is denied. But like Duffy, the error is not theirs. It is ours. To try to make another, any other, in our image is to want them to satisfy what we want more than what we say we want for them. Duffy's lesson was clear. We can't make anyone else be what we want them to be, but we can let them be themselves and love them for that and that alone. The world, of course, runs on stereotypes, all of them false, all of them useless, some of them even dangerous. And yet we persist to our own peril and to theirs. The world needs better of us. We simply cannot, must not, attempt to make the rest of the world into our own cloth. We have too much to learn from them. If we can understand that, then one morning we will all wake up and realize that the world is not only clearly at peace now, but that it was we who helped to make it so. And now for the living star of the show, who's waiting out there for your applause, but hold it, she'll pretty soon start to screech herself if you don't start. This one's called Lady Steps Up. Lady, her name is Lady Hildegard. We call her Lady for short. It's a misnomer, but we're living with it. Lady's quite capable of using human speech. After I put the cover over her cage at night, I can hear her practicing syllables in the dark, quite regularly, in fact. She presses her beak into the corner of the bars and goes on, all to herself. But practice or no practice, she's not inclined to say much. And why would she? She can get everything she wants without the effort of having to practice a foreign language to ask for it. Nevertheless, she'll sit on the top of her cage making strange bits of garble for hours. But as far as nice, quiet, conversant human speech goes, seldom and little. And then only with a sense of real intention. Pretty baby, when she's trying to charm someone. Irene, when she wants to go out the door with Maureen, one of her favorite people. And every once in a while she bellows, "No scream!" A little snippet she picked up from me. Needless to say, I shouted at her first, and now she uses it on me when she's being defiant about other things. Lady, trust me, is not a robot. She doesn't do anything simply because she's been told to do it. In fact, it can take an awful lot of convincing to get her to want to do what you want her to do. So, shortly after I'd had knee surgery, I was having enough trouble getting myself ready in the morning without having to talk to Lady into getting ready too. Joan, I heard Maureen say one morning, "Would you like me to take Lady downstairs for you?" Ah, will the age of miracles never cease. I couldn't have been more grateful. But then the conversation that I heard on the other side of the room went something like this. "All right, Lady, come on, let's go now. Come on, Lady, get on your potty perch. That's a girl, that's a girl. Now step up," she said, stretching out the two fingers that signal Lady that it's time to go somewhere else. "Come on now, Lady, step up." "Lady, we have to go. Step up." "Lady, we are going to be late for prayer. Step up. Right now, step up." I smiled to myself across the room. I couldn't wait to see who would win this one. Every morning it was the same routine, right down to the final exclamation point, as in, "Step up, Lady, right now, step up." It was at least a month later, maybe even more. We were sitting at the breakfast nook after prayer. Lady was on her cage, unusually quiet, and obviously planning something. Then suddenly she stretched herself to her full length, looked down the length of the breakfast table, and began to bob up and down. Fast, faster, fastest. She was looking straight at Maureen. "Lady," I said, "do you want to go see Maureen?" Lady jumped on my fingers. "Maureen," I said, leaning toward her with the bird, "Lady wants to come to you." But before Maureen could get herself focused and her head completely out of the newspaper, Lady was already poised to go. She jumped on the front of Maureen's sweater. She looked up straight into her eyes and yelled at the top of her deep, gravelly voice, "Step up! Right now! Step up!" Intonation and all. It was one of those in-your-face moments that brings us all to heart-stopping self-awareness, to a clear, direct sense of the way we sound to others. No confusing ladies' message at all. And how do you like being barked at? It was loud and plain as Judgment Day. After that, I noticed that the conversation between them began to change. Now I was hearing, "Lady, you want to get up?" Or, "Lady, are you ready to go?" Or, "Would you like a treat, lady?" In 1 minute, Lady had taught all of us to remember the civility animals deserve. On the other hand, she also signaled a new order of things. I have noticed since that famous role reverser conversation that "step up, right now, step up," has become a rallying cry, except that it's not from us to her anymore. It's from her to us. She clearly knows that step up is an order, but she has clearly forgotten, or she refuses to remember, that it was our order to her. Now she thinks it's hers to give to us. So if you're out of the room and she wants you, you hear "step up," meaning come in here right now. And if she wants you to give her something to eat, it's "step up." And if she wants a cuddle, it's "step up too." Lady has made her point, and it has been a clear one. Lady, like us, it seems, was not born to take orders. She was born to create relationships. And people in a relationship speak softly to one another. They care as much about what the other person is feeling as they do about what they may or may not want. It's been a strange turn of events. Like any young adult, Lady staked a claim that day, one that said, "I am a creature too. Talk to me nicely." The lesson has been an overwhelming one, coming as it did from 5 ounces of feathers. It has reminded us that the world is filled with mind. Ours is not the only one. And all of us deserve the respect that comes with it. Because, as the scriptures say clearly, God saw that it was good, all of it, not some of it good, and some of it, us, better. The notion of human respect for animal life fades into fantasy once the definitions of the differences between us mean more than what is alike about us, our common feelings and needs and contributions to life in general. Then we allow ourselves to treat animals like things and not like living, breathing, thinking, feeling animals at all. When animals speak up, to require respect and understanding and a little coaxing on the side, the human-animal scale balances a bit. We must thank them for that. They save us from the insufferable arrogance in us that comes with those who have been in the habit of defining their own superiority. Thank you for those actions. Let's talk about this, because here's what happens. We're all talking, we're having a good time, we're not paying attention to you. I know that that is not acceptable. But the fact of the matter is you have to wait. You can't just butt in. And you can't go drink Patty's Coke. That's not right. And the other thing you cannot do is pull tops off of my keys. No, you can't do that. I know. You two have a standoff going, don't you? Yeah. And you're trying to be charming. But let me tell you about the way you're going about it. Knocking over her cup, that doesn't impress her. Getting on her chair, that's not a good idea either. Maybe you could and dropping, every time you come and you push off one of her things on the floor, you lose points. So here's what you have to do. You can go over and you two can look at one another. Yeah. Okay, go on over and you can just look. Just look for a minute.
Okay, now if you just look at one another, yeah,